2024 Gober 09 Barbate, like 1300. So I want to talk about two things. One, ATM, and two, common sense, and then maybe even three will come back to me. So um, let's talk about ATM after. Do you know about ear? We'll talk about it after. All right. The craziest thing to me, and I've made videos about this before, is the whole be reasonable thing. The whole being on Instagram and seeing the two extremes, or just people on two sides of an issue, both of them saying that the other one is stupid, is unreasonable, isn't using common sense, and it's almost disgustingly stupid that it hasn't clicked for us. Wait a minute. What if common sense isn't real? What if reason sort of humanly isn't real? What if I'm arriving at this belief somehow and they're arriving at that belief somehow? Neither of us is actually taking the perfect path to our, respective belief. Now, I may think that my path is better and so on, but how meaningless it would be for me to say, gosh, why don't they just take the good path? What do you mean? What do you mean? You just happen to take that path, and yes, you believe that it's right, but you didn't get there. It wasn't the right path. The destination may be right, but you did not. You understand what I mean? So that's really annoying. Because if people realize that it wasn't about reason and common sense or evil, that it's not, oh, they want this and blah blah blah. Well, we'd be a lot more humble about our own ideas. We'd stop thinking that we're just using common sense, and also we'd have a better shot of exchanging with others. Hey, look, I didn't use common sense or reason to get to my belief, but I do think it's right. You didn't use reason or common sense to get to your belief, but you think that it's right. Okay, let's talk about it, because let's try to reason together, because reasoning's hard and unnatural. So let's try now. All right, the other thing. So the idea, part of the project that we've been working on the last few years, is to come up with vocabulary language for people to be able to talk more accurately about the mind. So, for instance, I would discourage anyone saying, "Oh, come on, be reasonable," or be logical in that sense, or "Oh man, they just have no common sense." Like, just stop yourself right there. If you think that a whole group of people are believe something because of a complete lack of common sense, you are mistaken. Whatever common sense is, and it isn't reason, it's sort of just the sensibilities that we have in common. Then we all have that. If you mean common sense is in reason, then no, we don't have that. Nobody does. But you and your enemies do have whatever common sense you have, they have as well. Yeah, they have as well. There may be a couple certain specific thoughts that one group has that another doesn't, that the group that has would consider common sense. Also, there are times when we don't, our common sensibilities don't seem applicable to a certain situation. And sometimes they're not applicable. So in that case, if you're not using your common sense, maybe it might be appropriate. Um, so, um, so yeah, common sense says that correlation equals causation. That's common sense. That's a sensibility we all evolved with. It's common sense. You don't look at two events that you see correlated and go and just not even and just go, oh gosh, what a coincidence. That's not common sense. Of course, it might actually be a coincidence, but that would not be common sense. That would not be like, come on, things keep happening together. Of course, they're related. They might not be related, but common sense and your initial impulse probably should be that there is some interesting relationship to pursue to see whether there is causation and so on. Okay. So we've been defining terms like reasonable, rational, logical, come up with a lot of vocabulary and so on. And one of the vocabulary is EAR. It's an acronym EER. And it's French for in being reasonable. And it's sort of a cheeky way, because since we are programmed to think that we're reasonable, and that might not change anytime soon, there are certain sentences that we're going to say anyway, but we could throw in this ear thing to let the other person know that even though we're acting like we think we're reasonable, that's been called into question. So for instance, you say, what? I wouldn't, I don't know. Someone's calling into question your taste in men, and your friend says to you, man, if that guy did this crazy thing, you'd want to go out with him. And you say, what? I don't want to go out with someone who did that. Well, you can say that, fine. But having a little self-awareness, you might add, being reasonable, I would not do that. And it gives you just a moment to be able to engage with that. And for another guy in here to go, I mean, not another one of you, but another element of you to go, oh, wait, we're not reasonable. So it is possible that I would do that, you know? And that kind of can open up and what it communicates is, right now, I don't approve of that. Right now, that behavior doesn't make any sense to me. So that's what you're expressing. You can't actually say that in general you wouldn't do that, because we're not reasonable, so we're not always consistent, right? So basically what it is, it's like, look, I don't know what I would really do, but if we were to assume that I'm reasonable, I know I'm not. But if we were to assume that I'm reasonable and that my future behavior would be consistent with my current perspective, then I would never do that. That's basically what it is. Okay. So I thought of another thing, which could maybe replace some instances of ear, which is you say like, I didn't use ears. You say like, I wouldn't go out with him, or I wouldn't go out with him, or I wouldn't go out with him because he did that. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I swear to God, bro. Bro. Or, well, no. I promise you, bro. Yeah. I know I'm not. All right. So why do you think I would do that then? Because right now I'm telling you, that doesn't make any sense to me. All right. So then in that moment, you can also replace it with Adam. ATM, at the moment. So rather than trying to, and this is also relates to the whole fact that not just about us not being reasonable, but the fact that the self doesn't exist. You know what, I was going to do this while walking, but we're not going to do that. I was just going to have a couple puffs of this and then start walking with you, give you a little bit of a dynamic background, but it's too hot and we're not going to do that. So let's just finish here. So you say, oh, I, Adam, would not be attracted to that. I, Adam, wouldn't. And so this is not just about the reason thing, but about the self-illusion, knowing that we are not consistent across time with our perspectives. So not only are we not logical, but we're not even really sort of one entity you can pin down. So all you can really talk about is, look, at the moment, blah, blah. Honestly, you could meaningfully talk about certain patterns and trends, but it's just that unless you've properly studied it, I wouldn't trust you to. And so best to just, and I mean, all of us. And so I think that it's good to, I don't really know what my trends are. And I think it's good to kind of start from the bottom. Go, you know what? I don't know anything about me from moment to moment. But in this moment, here's what seems to be true. Here's what I imp Adam. Imp is I have the impression that this is the case. So I imp Adam like that. I have the impression that I like that at the moment. I imp Adam like that. And it's just more honest. Because there's no way when you're talking about yourself in the moment, I don't believe that every single time the mechanisms are checking the past. And even if they were checking the past, I don't believe that we have any real means of evaluating objectively our past narrative. So, I also don't even think that's really consulted or thought about unless. But yeah, if you're just talking about yourself, just talk about yourself in that moment. Is my point. Yeah. Use imp to say, look, I think this is what's happening, but I have enough self-awareness to know that I don't really know. Use Adam to say, I think this is what's happening in this moment, but I know that I'm not a consistent entity, or it's always like that. And use ear to say, this is what I think this is what I would think I would do, what would be reasonable for me to do. But all right, I admit that I don't really know what I would do, and it's possible that you're right, that that's what I would do, whatever you said I would do. So I follow a lot of right-wing stuff. 2024 Gober 09 Bravo 1747, and there's a lot of anti-trans stuff, and there's a lot of anti-trans stuff, but every once in a while, not as much as there's anti-trans stuff, there will be stories about people who detransition, so detrans people. And you know, there's this whole thing of they're saying, you know, there's all these people that detransitioned, and you know, so it's really terrible that we're putting people through this transition process because then they realize that it was a mistake. There's something weird about the realization that something was wrong. So I was just on Instagram and I saw a video where it's like a panel of detrans people, and someone asked, when did you find out, when did you figure out that you weren't actually born in the wrong body, you know, and that you needed to detransition? And what the detrans guy said, I have heard before, and I feel like, and I don't understand why I keep hearing it. It's weird to me. So what might a detrans person say about the moment when they realized? They could say, like, you know, I was in the new body and I didn't feel better. And 6 months went by and I didn't feel sort of more at home or more myself or anything like that, right? That would be, and because I believe that, of course, there are going to be people that detransition, right? Just like there are regrets for any decision, surgery, whatever. Humans are not good decision makers. So, of course, there are going to be humans that choose to transition and then regret it. We're not good decision makers, and we're not good evaluators after that we've made the decision. So that's what you might expect to hear. I don't know, what else can we think of that we might expect to hear about when they realized that they weren't actually born in the wrong body? Maybe they could say something like, you know, I was hanging out with people who identified as trans, and I connected with them more than I had with anybody else, and so I thought I was trans as well, and, you know, or you know, I kind of became trans, you know, because, you know, the social brain creates identity, right? Bruce Hood. So you know, you're hanging out with a bunch of trans people, okay, you may become trans. Just like if you hang out with a bunch of fat people, you'll be fat. If you hang out with a bunch of millionaires, maybe you'll... that would have been such a good joke. I don't actually know what the joke would be, but it'd be something like... it would be something like... 24 Gober 09 Bravo 1801. Did you figure out what the joke was? I didn't figure it out. I got a call. What were we talking about though? Shit, I thought I had figured it out actually. No, I didn't. Alright, because I just knew I was going to say something about the joke. What was the joke about again? Oh yeah, if you hang out with millionaires and something like you're a prostitute. Like, something where we're expecting you to say you're going to become a millionaire. But instead it's like something else. And some really good critique of millionaires maybe, I don't know. Or some critique of people who are enamored with millionaires, I don't know. Alright, what were we talking about though, actually? Oh yeah, the D-trans thing. So, but instead, and of course, you know, dico sine quadro. I don't know why I noticed these two things. But anyway, it seems like there's too much of this. It seems like a talking point, a narrative that's being pushed. It's probably organically sort of happening. I don't think it came from this D-trans person. I think he heard this from somebody, but also did believe it. There's this idea of malevolence that the trans and allies community, anybody who is like, hey, if you want to transition, you can. This is the line that I keep hearing. And I feel like I can only say I've heard it twice, but they didn't have my best interest in mind. That they had other motives. I didn't watch the rest of the video, actually, this one. I started recording. Alright, let's watch the rest. Oh, gosh, I don't feel like it. I feel like doing actual work. Yeah, no, I'm going to do actual work. But I'm curious, I guess, but not curious enough to look, as to... It's just so wild to me that malinting be the explanation for the trans movement. Like, I mean, first of all, malinting is generally wrong, but what do you think they're getting out of it? Like, why do you believe that there are people out there trying to get people to transition? Now, of course, I do believe that people can be mistaken. Absolutely. Someone can be an advocate for transitioning, which is a good thing because, boom, you know, I'm not going to talk about trans. Because I kind of think it's just that humans got really strict about their gender roles, and that's why trans people are confused. There's no such thing as male and woman. Yes, there's vagina and penis. Yes, there are certain sort of tendencies, biological, psychological tendencies, but there's so much overlap that men and women basically don't. That isn't really a thing outside of reproduction. But we've made it such a thing that, yeah, of course now we've got people who are, you know, like, oh, wait, so I have a penis, so that means I what? And what? And what? I don't feel right. So sometimes they don't feel right because they're autistic and they're among humans. But then, of course, they think, maybe if I have a different label assigned to me, then, you know, then I'll be happy. Or they're like, and what if I had a vagina? What are those people supposed to do? Yeah, I don't know. That might be more me. Let's do that. Anyway, There's my opinion on trans. But my opinion doesn't really matter because I'm not trans and don't know trans people well enough. So because that's the case, I just go, yeah, okay, go for it, whatever. But so I'm sure there are people who are making mistakes who see themselves in someone and say, yeah, transitioning might be the right move for you. You know, and the conversation might go in such a way where the advisor is talking about the things that are reminiscent of the advisor. Let's say the advisor is trans. And then the advisor just misses the details about the person that might counterindicate that. Happens. Of course it's going to happen. Not a big deal. You know, I mean, that's part of what makes transitioning a big decision. It's like, hey, it's possible that this is not a good idea. This is what makes any decision a good decision. The possibility, any decision a big decision. The possibility that it's not the right decision. That and that it has major consequences regardless of whether or not it's the right decision. But yeah, that's why it's a big fucking deal to change, you know, your chemistry and all, and, you know, your anatomy and shit. Of course it's a big fucking deal, you idiot. And it's because mistakes can happen. And so weird to hear D-trans people not just chalking it up to, you know, mistakes happen and I was wrong, but to this idea there are people that wanted me to do this, that, and he said they were self-interested, and that's so wild to me. So he looked like a guy in the video, so I'm guessing he was a guy, I'm guessing he's already detransitioned. I don't know. But if that's the case, then, what was I saying? Yeah, how could it be out of self-interest that someone made you put on boobs? That's so crazy to me. And it's just another example of, to be productive here, to be constructive here, of how tempting the malint is to us. Not just how tempting, but I mean, it's automatic, it happens. And then when we hear someone else malinting, we're like, yeah, okay, that's probably right. Obviously, if you're a trans advocate, you see that and you dismiss it. But anybody who isn't or is more anti-trans, they're gonna be, yeah, that makes sense. They tricked you into, you know, taking testosterone blockers or estrogen or whatever the fuck. Yeah, they were just looking out for themselves. That's why they put boobs on you, for their agenda. And even to an average human brain, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But the malint is so attractive. Anytime someone can have an explanation for something that involves identifying a transgressor, evolutionarily, that's super beneficial. Anytime something bad happens, if you can identify the cause of that harm, and especially that thing has the intention of doing that again, so it wanted to do it that first time, and likely will want to do it again, that's super useful. At least it's super dangerous to miss out on that, right? So there's an actual human being who is robbing you, they want to, blah, blah. And you're like, nah, it's a fluke. Each time it's a fluke. It's a fluke. It's a fluke. Won't happen again. Not a big deal. He did it for me. Whatever, you know, whatever. But so of course we are the descendants of people that had a good sense of how to malint, how to attribute bad intention to people quickly. Not reasonably, but quickly and categorically. Because to me, it just sounds so strange, so alien, this idea of because when I heard it one time, someone who had, and of course, I'm not a detransitioner either, so I may, please tell me how I'm wrong. And I have shown more sympathy to a trans person's testimony than a D-trans person's testimony in this video. And I know we're all just human, just fucking around. So I apologize for that partiality. But the people that are around you, D-trans person, I think are quite shit. And the people that are around trans people tend to be better. Because D-trans, that community, so maybe it's because it's my camp. That's why the mallet makes no sense to me. Because watch me, I'm about to mallet the other camp. The D-trans, anti-trans community, when they're encouraging someone to detransition, when they're celebrating someone who has, I could very easily, I would very easily say it's because they're not really interested in that person. They're interested in their own ideas. Wow. So wow. So it's first of all just important for us to recognize that the argument I thought was so crazy, made no sense from the other camp, is actually an argument that I would make about that camp. So we have to pause here. This is how critical thinking works, with critical recognition. This is a very valuable moment. Maybe what I'm saying is valuable, but we can't continue to dig that way right now. We need to pause and digest that reality, really engage with that reality. Give all the mechanisms a chance to hear that fact, that the argument we were mocking is the same one we're making. Gosh, I'm so poetic. And now we have to pause with that to take that seriously. Then we can look at, is there some important consequential difference between the argument we're mocking and the argument we're making? None comes to mind right now. And I know that I probably could think of something that sounded right. And to reduce the chances of something false sounding right, I'm going to stop recording and I'm just going to really engage. I'm a little bit too drunk to really, really engage. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to add to it. I'm not going to go auto-justify. I'm not going to azure it right now. I'm going to shut the fuck up and sit with my realization. Okay, here, bud. Is that like a car egg actually that's parked or what? I don't remember. Maybe. You know what? I do want to be a little bit flatter. I'm going to be honest with you, Nia. Golf 10 Charlie 1559. I'm editing. I was just thinking of one awake that I can endorse, because I tend to not like when people talk about how they're awake, they're conscious, they've woken up, and everybody else is asleep, whatever. And I feel like, people on either side of any issue could say that. And I'm not saying that anybody who identifies as awake is awake in the sense that I'm about to describe it, or in any meaningful sense, because I'm claiming right now that this is the only meaningful sense. And that is the realization that what is normal is not what is best, or is not what is good, necessarily. But to keep it simple, normal doesn't equal good. So it's not because we've been taught that, for instance, it's important to buy a Mercedes. Even though we've been taught that. So, and I would say that someone who's asleep is someone who just buys in that wholeheartedly. And even someone who says, I know it's silly, but I like it, because it seems like part of them has some notion of the silliness of it, but they don't really understand the silliness of it, because then they wouldn't like it. I mean, I'll make exceptions for someone who their first car was a Mercedes. You know, or they have some relationship to Mercedes other than the advertising and the status symbol. Or, okay, if it's like, you know, I grew up poor and you know, my whole childhood I was taught that that's sort of the goal, is to be rich. And I really do know that it's silly, but there's a part of me that will never be happy, it feels like, until I just, you know, I think driving around a Mercedes, that would do it. And in everything else, I'm not going to do the jewelry thing. I'm not going to do the brand name clothing. None of that. I'm just going to satisfy that little poor kid in me with Mercedes. Okay, I'll make an exception for you. Because, okay, you really do buy into it wholeheartedly, it seems like. And by wholeheartedly, I mean most of the mechanisms buy, or don't buy into the, you know, the status and all that bullshit. Not that status in and of itself is bullshit, but yeah. And then if it's very instrumental, like if you're, I don't know, there are certain jobs where, yes, even if you don't buy into it, you know that other people do, and so you can't be driving around in a Camry and get your job done. You know, I'm making exceptions for people, but what I'm worried about is that people are hearing these exceptions, go, yeah, that one, that's me. But I mean, you know, no, I don't. You know, no. I feel like those are just things that we could use to justify it. But look, I'm not going to make a claim one way or the other about what your actual values are. You can just think about that yourself. About whether you're just rationalizing the values, saying that it's not about, you know, the societally assigned value, or it's only for because you're being pragmatic or whatever. But you know, there'll be is there's a fourth thing we have to invent. Or this could be a part of one of the three alarises, the manalaris, the dialaris, and the wealaris. And we could call it the autaleris. And this would be techniques, questions you can ask yourself, exercises that you can do to, on your own, better get to know your processes, right? Now, the more humble you are, the less attached you are to your ideas. The easier this is going to be, but someone who's willing to sit down and think about their thoughts, and that's all they've got, that willingness to sit down. But every time they think about their thoughts, all they see is confirming things. So we would want to develop a technique for that person at that end of the spectrum, still on the spectrum of some willingness to look at their ideas, but maybe very little ability. And nobody has total ability, which is why everybody will need this technique. But, you know, some people, you know, need a little bit more guidance than others, maybe a little bit more. So it'd be like, you know, you would disallow justification, right? So you would have a worksheet. You'd be required to write down what you believe to be true. And then, you know, the worksheet says, well, it isn't true. Why isn't it true? And you have to assume it isn't true. Why isn't it true? And at this point, you either get mad and walk away, or you're absolutely fucking forced. You know, it's not, why might this be true? It's not what could be some problems in your thing or whatever. It's just fuck all the truth of that. So now, why isn't it true? Well, because the evidence doesn't support this. The evidence doesn't support that. Now you can cheat there. You can say, oh, because the sky is because the earth is flat. That's why what I'm saying isn't true. All right, you can cheat there. But then there would be parts of the technique to discourage that by motivating you as well, and by slapping the bonnets, by slapping those its that got you to sit down. Like, hey, in the previous question, were you a bit facetious? That's okay. That's okay. Absolutely okay. That's what happens. That's what the brain produces. Okay. Give me 3 more reasons that your thing is wrong. Were those facetious also? No problem. Do it until maximum of 10 until you find something that isn't ludicrous. Then you can move on to the next step. And at this point, you're like, because you can admit, yeah, those things are ludicrous, and you'll say, yeah, but any counter argument to what I'm saying is going to be ludicrous because it's just so obviously true what I'm saying. Oh, so your option is you get mad and walk away, or you fucking do it. You know, and there's going to be, you know, hints. Maybe there's an issue with a definition. Maybe your thing isn't true if there's been equivocation with this term. So it could be a really guided thing. Which term in your belief has the least concrete, consistent definition? What is the word that is used the most? And, you know, how concrete is that definition? Go talk to a friend and ask them to define that word. And then write it down here. Compare your definitions. And honestly, if you can just do that, and if you get to that point where your friend had a slightly different definition, and you write down exactly what they said, because you might think they have the same definition or different, you might misinterpret. You write down exactly what they said. And if the words are different, you have to write down an affirming statement, even though they might be the same. Just if the words are different, there is a possibility of, you know, unclear definition for this word. And so, you know, so my argument might be flawed because, well, an argument depends on a common understanding of words, on common definitions. Or at least I need to add to my argument my definition. I don't know. Okay, it's very hot. It's very hot. That's as much thinking as I can do about that. So we'll make a little note, an autaleris. So let's define these to see what overlap there is. So an autaleris is, you're not looking at anything external. Maybe every once in a while you'll go check something. You know, get input from a friend, check a fact. You know, maybe in the worksheet you have to check one fact of what you said. Can you find just anything really saying that is true from some kind of a credible source? But maybe not. That's more of a malinting, isn't it? No, it's just like a one, just really one. It's just do you even care about evidence is kind of what the question is. And you don't know whether you care about evidence. Well, here's how you can find out. Let me think. Do I have a specific thing I can pull up that supports what I'm saying? And then pull it up, write down the link, write down the author or whatever. So you're not really investigating your belief. No, you are. You're investigating your own thinking processes or belief. A malinting it's a little bit more externalized. You're investigating maybe someone else's belief. You're trying to decide whether or not to adopt it. A autaleris, of course, is you're evaluating yours and someone else's in order to work together with that other person and arrive at some kind of a truth. And then a autaleris is where there's some third party. So maybe that third party, those are the spectators of a debate or something, who are evaluating the content of the debate. Or it can be the third person, like the receiver of some big discovery. We'll just say the first person, the second person, or the two women who discovered this thing. You know, you got the second person to check the results, and then you got the third person to receive this information. They're evaluating this announcement as a community. I don't know. So we'll see what my sense of those words, how it evolves. It's very clear to me what a autaleris is. It's about two people and about two or more. Well, no, it doesn't have to be two people. It's about two or more claims being exchanged and treated. A autaleris it's not about what's happening between the claimers. It's about the audience watching them claim things. So that's a technique for them. Meanwhile, though, the people participating in the disagreement, in the discussion, can be doing a autaleris. Meanwhile, the spectators are doing a autaleris. But why wouldn't you just say they're each doing a malinting? They're each just evaluating, I don't know. I mean, either way, both a malinting and a autaleris, they're both kind of first-person things. It's just a question of singular or plural, really. So it's just a question whether it's a community thing, in which case you need techniques about communication, or it's an individual thing, in which case it's malinting. Whereas autaleris, that's between people. So yes, it's plural, but it's not just that first person. It's not one group or one entity, right? It's different representatives of the Kesser using this technique. I think this makes sense. Hey, we should go live behind that building by the cemetery, eh? What do you think? Golf 11 Delta 1606. So I'm gonna be honest with you. Here's some proof that I'm not a Bible scholar. I didn't really know anything about the history, so I'm reading this not really knowing its relationship to history. And I'm gonna be honest with you. It's so embarrassing to say, but I didn't know this was real history. I don't know how anyway. So I didn't know this whole thing about these tribes of Israel was real. Because as the history is being told, the history is also being explained by what God wants, right? So I just took them to be one and the same. This is the story of how God organized his people. Well, I don't really think the whole God story is real, so I thought the whole story wasn't real. Oh yeah, right. And so then I was Googling. I wanted to be able to picture Judah and Israel, which are these two groups in Kings, the two Jewish communities in in the Holy Land, and I guess Judah is the Holy Land, and then Israel is north of it. But I wanted like a Game of Thrones map, And then there's just a totally factual video recounting these events without the God stuff. Ah, I see. And I'm glad I learned that now. I wish I'd learned it a little bit sooner. So that's my bad for not realizing how historical it was. But here's the last thing that I read before the video. I'm reading 2 Kings chapter 12. And I had noticed before I watched the video, here we have 2 Kings 12, chapter 12, verse 2. All his life, Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. So my first thought was, all those kings and even judges I think there were judges that had done evil in the Lord's sight. Definitely kings. Yeah, judges as well, right? I don't know, but definitely kings. It's just my first thought was, God couldn't have given everybody a Jehoiada to instruct them. So anyways, I was like, all right, finally, someone like David. I think David did really well. And then who was the one recently that did pretty well? But see, here's what I was noticing. Sometimes it wasn't black and white. Sometimes there would be a sentence like, so let's give you an example of a black and white sentence. Okay, so 2 Kings chapter 3. This is war between